A second. All those in favor? Aye. Hearing that, the agenda is. So, the board will then recess to closed session to discuss the public employee relations, public employee assistance dismissal, conflicts with real property negotiators, and member labor negotiator. Is there anyone to speak to the board? Okay. Seeing none, hearing none, we will now recess session and return at approximately 6 p.m. Thank you.
There are no virtual comments. I still can't hear anyone.
Testing, testing.
Testing. I heard a slight mic activity just a moment ago. I can hear you very faintly. And my sound is all the way up. That's better, but it's still faint.
Test 2, 3.
Better.
Test 1, 2, 3.
That's good. Nope. I don't hear anything. Nothing. 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 Barely. What? Very faint. You know, when we tested earlier, there was only one computer logged in. Now there's two, maybe that's why. Mm.
Yeah, because I think like when I do this, this is just
Mhm.
the computer microphone, so that's why it's working, but
Right, but how did you guys have it earlier when it was just one computer showing in the Zoom?
yeah, it was the same as before. It was connected using the 5 or 6 yeah, so we haven't changed anything on the settings.
But now it shows two logins as presenter, whereas earlier it just showed it one time.
Okay, so the other one is just me, so I could,
Oh, well, that's weird.
Same thing, no difference.
No, that sounds good.
How about now? Does it sound good too?
Yeah, are you talking softly though?
I'm talking on these, on the microphone, on these microphones. So I'm wondering if.
It sounds like you're talking softly.
I'm talking what?
It sounds like you're talking softly, like quietly.
Want me to speak louder like this? Is this okay?
No, that's worse.
All right, how about now?
It's good.
There's an echo, isn't it?
Nope. Do it again?
Is there an echo?
No, yeah, can't hardly hear you.
Can you barely hear me still?
Worse. It's worse.
How about now?
That's good. When you move the mic around,
Can you hear me now?
can't hear you. Nope,
Nothing.
nope, no. Try moving the mic over a different direction. I feel like
How about now? 'Cause I moved it.
same, it's really light.
Test 1, 2, 3.
No,
Test 1, 2, 3.
I can barely hear you.
hey, Rochelle, I'm going to turn off the system and
Okay.
restart it, okay?
Okay, okay.
what's he gonna do for the summer? Yeah, so I'm winding down. Yeah, so slowly winding down, and then I'll set things up. More. Then after that, has some conferences in July, but there's a big chunk there after this meeting, after today's meeting. A little trip. A little road trip. If I was old, I need further. Okay, we do it. This month. She is the senior. She's not 80 and she's in bed, you know. My God. And he is supposed to just give us a shot. Oh, that. Oh, yeah. But then I go. Forever, but it's nice.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
That sounds good.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Good,
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 Testing 1, 2, 3.
good.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Perfect.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yep,
Testing 1, 2, 3.
good.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Okay.
started a Google map of the cities and I can pin it, so that's why I wanted, yeah.
Hey, Rochelle, I'd like to test the microphone system one more time, please.
Okay, that one's good.
How about this one?
Good,
Microphone 4.
good.
But yeah, we have got the girls in Jason like more of a like skeleton and this is like kind of flexible. I would rather have an itinerary.
Nothing.
Microphone 3.
Oh, good.
Plan it out. Enough to just.
Microphone 2.
Good,
Yeah,
Microphone 1.
good.
that's what they're always saying. And I'm like, but we got this place is food and that place is a less. I just want to be immersed in being here. So it's a good balance.
Public microphone.
Good,
Amy's microphone.
good,
That was on the whole time? Mike.
Mark and Yvonne's microphone.
good. Slight echo on theirs.
Slight echo. Okay.
Well, try it one more time.
How about now?
That's good.
It was muted, so only the sound was.
Oh, okay.
I can hear in that area that you're in right now, I can hear a little bit. With no mic.
So here you can hear all of.
I can hear you. Yeah.
How about now? Can you hear this also?
That one's slightly lower.
Okay. How about now? Is this better?
Yeah, that's good.
Right, so as long as the microphone is like this, you can be okay.
Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, who is that?
Amy.
Hi, Amy. Aw, good to hear your voice.
I know.
I know. So weird to see everyone on the other end, but not be there.
Forgot to ask you how you wanted to do present. Do you want me to try to decide? Then I can advance that. Check out if the term that you have. Yeah, because everything I think will be. Oh geez, like before, if I share on my screen through this, it'll come up on there, right?
Also that it's called the air casting doesn't work anymore.
Oh.
So if you want to present from your laptop, we just have to connect an HDMI cable. Yes, and I have an HDMI cable that I could connect, because there's one that's connected to Cecily's laptop, but that's a short cable.
So is it easier for me to just share the PowerPoints with you? Or?
With the Cecily. Cecily has 3 PowerPoint that she downloaded from the board meeting.
Oh, okay, then
So yours is one of them. I think it's the
And then a federal local indicators, California dashboard, local
yeah,
indicators.
the dashboard, yeah. So she
Okay.
already has those to download it,
Okay,
so she could present and share her screen.
so then her screen is gonna go up there.
Correct.
Okay, so then I guess when I present, I should probably go to the podium, because I won't be.
Because then you'll be able to see, yeah.
Okay.
that'll work, yeah.
Right. Okay, oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was gonna ask to record the entire time, but we're gonna. From my office. Okay, should I start off here?
If there's not that.
Since we're all right, since we're a little bit late, I'm going to go ahead and skip my president welcome, but I just want to say congratulations to everyone for finishing the year. Congratulations to our graduates. I was only able to make one graduation this year, but it was beautiful at Christopher. So thank you, everyone. During our regular board meeting, there are many opportunities for the public to address the board, public hearings, public comment, or during a specific agenda item. If you wish to speak to the board, please complete the online request to speak form or use the raise your hand feature if you're online, or fill out our piece of paper and request to speak in person. When it is your turn to speak, your microphone will be unmuted and you will have 3 minutes to speak before the microphone is muted online. The Brown Act governs meetings of governmental bodies in California. Your comments to the board must be specific to the agenda item you are addressing. And if there is no specific item, you are welcome to present comments during public comment. The Brown Act permits public criticism of the district's policies, programs, and services, and of board members' action. Constitutional First Amendment free speech rights permit the public to criticize employees' job performance. However, the board will not listen to personal attacks, name calling, or the ridiculing of employees. I would be honored to recite the land acknowledgement, but Member Pacheco, if you may please. Thank you.
We acknowledge that the Oak Grove School District and our schools occupy the unceded territory of the Mohawk Ohlone Nation, the sovereign nation and original people of the skies, land, and waters where we work and learn. The Mohawk Ohlone people are the stewards of these lands and of the teaching and learning that comes from and responds to the needs of the land and people who share it. May our daily lives and work, research, teaching, community engagement support the evolving vision of the Mohawk Ohlone for their community in these lands.
Thank you. Superintendent Monzo, will you please lead the flag salute?
Please stand. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The board met in closed session to discuss public employee performance evaluation of the superintendent and no action was taken. Public employee discipline release dismissal, Government Code Section 54957, and no action was taken. Conference with real property negotiators and no action was taken. And confer with labor negotiator and no action was taken. We will now move to our public hearing of the night. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right, I'll pass it on to you. Superintendent's report. Thank you, Superintendent Monzo.
Problem, thank you. Let's see. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to start. As you may recall, at the previous board meeting, we recognized a number of individuals, and some of our individuals that we recognized were some of our classified employees of the year. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend the Classified Employee of the Year celebration at the Santa Clara County Office of Education, where 3 of our classified employees were recognized as winners for Santa Clara County in 2023 as classified employees of the year. And so I'm so proud to say that Oak Grove classified employees were won 3 out of 9 categories and at the county level. And so I'd like to extend congratulations to Karen Hemileski, payroll technician at the district office, Cheryl Snyder, Santa Clara school secretary, and Na Duan, food service worker 2 at Taylor. So I see that we have Miss Cheryl here. Isn't it? They were here a little while ago. I think they might have scooted out. And so, but again, just want to recognize all of their efforts and their work as well. Want to also take an opportunity to thank all of our parent groups that met with me throughout the year, our DAC, our ABLA, Coffee Clutch parents, and also folks that came out as part of Café con Jose throughout the year as well. I look forward to starting that up again next year, and they're so critical to the success of what happens at all of our schools and the extra effort that they bring and to support teaching and learning and supporting our teachers and students in our classrooms. I'm happy to have attended a number of 8th grade ceremonies, promotions at Indigo, at Herman, at Christopher, and at Davis. And again, great celebrations, an opportunity to recognize the journey that our youngsters are embarking on, and that we're part of, fortunate that we were part of their history here as part of their educational experience. And so wishing them, of course, much success as they transition into high school and beyond as well. And last but not least, I wanted to also mention that we were able to hire our new Director of Facilities and Maintenance, Operations and Transportation. As you may recall, one of our folks that were in that role moved on to another position, and so we want to welcome Mr. Edgar Dueñas, who has joined our team in the FMOT department. With that, again, just want to extend our appreciation on behalf of myself and our executive team to just the great and exemplary work of our teachers, our classified staff, of all of our community, Oak Grove community, that made this school year a successful year, and looking forward to completing this school year this June, and then looking forward to 2023-24 with, of course, always opportunities to improve and always the commitment to do what's best for our kids in our community. So with that, concludes our superintendent report.
Thank you, Superintendent Monso. And again, just thank you everyone for a wonderful school year and all the efforts. And we look forward to a great new year in August, which I know will come very soon. All right. So just for the purposes of continuity, I'm going to restate the closed session report. The board met in closed session to discuss those 4 items, and we took no action on all of these 4 items. I will now go ahead and go to our public hearing. Our first public hearing of the night is the proposed adoption of the Oak Grove School District Local Control Accountability Plan for fiscal year 23-24. So I now open the public hearing on this item.
There are no virtual comments.
Okay, seeing none in person, I now close the public hearing on the proposed adoption of the Oak Grove School District Local Control Accountability Plan for fiscal year 23-24. Our second public hearing, excuse me, our second public hearing of the night is on the proposed adoption of the Oak Grove School District budget for fiscal year 23-24 and projected ending fund balances identified in the budget. I now open the public hearing on the proposed adoption of the Oak Grove School District budget.
No virtual comments.
Seeing none in person, I now close the public hearing on the proposed adoption of the Oak Grove School District budget for fiscal year 2023-24 and projected ending fund balances identified in the budget. Thank you. That does bring us to our public comment opportunity. This is an opportunity for individuals to address the board on any school-related issue, which is not a part of this evening's agenda. Are there any individuals who wish to speak to the board at this time?
There are no virtual comments.
Okay, seeing none in person, that brings us to our bargaining unit comment. Okay, let's see, CSEA, please, Vice President Baylock.
Hi, CSEA Vice President Chuck Baylott. I'm not reporting anything out. I just want to wish everybody a good summer. Thanks to Oak Grove administration, executive team for working with us throughout another year. It went by pretty smoothly. We feel like we got a lot done, and I just appreciate it. Everybody who's taking time off this summer, enjoy it. For those that are at work, I'll see you next week. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you, Vice President Baylock. President Mary Paz Berlin, OGA.
Thank you. Good evening. Board members, executive team, colleagues and community members. First, I wanted to wish everybody a happy Pride Month. I hope you all have been celebrating or will celebrate or recognize and celebrate our LGBTQ plus youth, our siblings, our fathers, our mothers, aunts, uncles, teachers, neighbors, and our colleagues. Pride Month was born out of a resistance and a fight. What started at the Stonewall Uprising. I think the global fight continues. You know, in our country, there's right now there's over 520 anti-LGBTQ plus bills. And in our state, in our school boardrooms, just like ours, it's become a battleground that has, in regards to the books that we can't read and curriculum that we can't have, the push for misgendering of our transgender students, and the silencing of teachers who have been accused of indoctrinating our students. These school board battles are not they're happening in other states, but they are also happening in the great state of California. So I share that to express my deep appreciation and our deep appreciation and gratitude for the school board that we have now and for the executive team, for your leadership in helping carve out that pathway where we can have an inclusive school district where everybody is accepted, where we recognize that we are a public school institution and that we are here for everybody. Sometimes I think that when we're kind of in this insular community, we feel like this is something that happens everywhere. I have the opportunity and the privilege to meet other people in other school districts and leaders in different parts of California, and it is not like this. The kind of school board that we have, that you all make up, is a very atypical. And I don't believe that that's been by accident. So I do appreciate your leadership, and I hope that that continues and we continue to support our youth and just be aware that these are things that are happening in our world, and maybe you have already received things from our community, but I appreciate that you're going to be strong and continue in defending and protecting our students and our community. So I do acknowledge that we're not a perfect school district, but I recognize that we're a creative group and that we've been open and receptive. So I hope to continue that partnership with everybody here for the next school year. I also want to wish everybody an early Juneteenth, which is next Monday. The African American Community Service Agency is having their 42nd annual Juneteenth Festival in San Jose from 12 to 7 this Saturday. I'll be there, so I hope to see you there too. If you see me, come say hi. It's a great way to enjoy, learn, eat, support our African American artists, entrepreneurs, entertainers, and artisans in San Jose. So hope you can join. I wanted to give a quick update on community schools. I will be attending, along with 2 other teachers from the DLC, from the Davis Learning Community, a workshop this summer on community schools. So what our plan is for the fall is to have another forum with our teachers in the DLC and also with our families in the DLC. And then lastly, I wanted to just share an appreciation for the regular meetings and conversations that I have with board members, but also with Superintendent Chaidez and Bowles and Special Ed Director Park, Luciana Park. I think it's a I think those are things too that Ms. Bowles or Assistant Superintendent Bowles and I were just talking about, that sometimes those are some things that we take for granted, that we have that kind of relationship. It isn't like that in every school district, so I'm glad that we're able to foster those kinds of relationships here in Oak Grove, and I hope that that continues. This concludes my report.
Thank you so much. That brings us to our consent agenda. Superintendent Monzo, if you can please present the consent agenda.
Thank you, President Hernandez. I'd like to recommend the board approve consent agenda items as submitted.
Is there any public comment on our consent agenda?
No virtual comments?
Okay, seeing none in person, trustees, any comments, questions?
Is there a motion already?
Mm-mm.
So I so move.
Okay.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Member Martinez,
Aye.
member Jacob,
Aye.
member Pacheco,
Aye.
Vice President Gonzalez,
Aye.
President Hernandez,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to our first action item on the night, an extension of President Berlin's words earlier. Member Pacheco, if you'd like to say a couple words about the resolution that you put forward. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's really nice to see that the board is adopting a new a culture of celebrating our communities every month, depending on what Heritage Month it is for that given month. So last month it was Jewish Heritage Month and Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. This month, because it is June, it's in celebration of our LGBTQ plus Americans. Last year, our board took the brave step of not only celebrating that month in May of 2022 in advance of June, but also adopting a series of excellent first steps in addressing the needs and assessing the needs of our LGBTQ students and staff, which is why our district is probably the only one that flies the pride flag every day of the month, every year, in perpetuity, throughout the entire year. So that's fantastic because it's, like all of our families, regardless of what they look like, should always feel safe, included, and represented. And that flag flying at that staff every day is a reminder of that. And it doesn't matter what month it is. So it's great to see this resolution again. Let's show our community that we value them and feel that they deserve to be included, and let's celebrate this month along with the rest of the country in solidarity with our LGBTQ plus Americans.
Right. Thank you, Member Pacheco. Are there any public comments at this time?
There are no public comments virtually.
Okay, seeing none in person. Are there any questions or comments from trustees? All right, so I'll open the floor for motions.
I move that the Board of Trustees adopt resolution number 1443-06/23, recognizing the month of June as National LGBTQ plus Pride Month as presented.
I'll second. All right, so we have a first and a second. May I please have a roll call vote?
Member Martinez,
Aye.
member Jacob,
Aye.
member Pacheco,
Aye.
Vice President Gonzalez,
Aye.
President Hernandez,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. Our second action item of the night is the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Block Grant Plan. Superintendent Monzo.
Yes, I'd like to have our Associate Superintendent, Mr. Mark Evans, introduce this item.
Yes, thank you. The Arts and Music Block Grant was part of the 22-23 budget. It was a one-time block grant, and our district received roughly $5 million. It was a very open-ended grant. Yeah, its name was called Arts and Music, but they had a variety of potential uses for it. It's available to be used through the 25-26 school year. We have not yet expended any of those funds, and before we do, we need to present a plan to the board. In this case, because of the governor's proposal in the May revision to reduce that block grant by 50%, we presented two budgets. The first one is fully funded, would pay for 20 FTEs of art, music, and PE teachers over the next couple of years. If the funding is cut in the final budget by 50%, the second budget is where we would end up landing. The legislature passed the budget today with a much smaller reduction in that grant. However, that's not the final budget. It still has to be finished with the governor, so we don't know exactly where it will land. I suspect it'll be not the second and maybe not completely the first. So we kind of tried to straddle the unknown for the time being and present to you a budget in the best case scenario and in the worst case scenario. Regardless, wherever those funds fall, they will be used to their fullest ability to fund these for 2 years. So may I answer any questions for you?
I'm just wondering, how does this relate to Prop 28?
This is the Arts and Music Block Grant. Prop 28 was a proposition which is an additional, it's just shy of $1 billion on top of Prop 98, our regular funding source. And that gets allocated out to school sites to use for arts and music. So this was a one-time grant. Those will be ongoing dollars.
And has our district received, now it's off topic, but has our district received?
We have not yet, and we have not even actually budgeted them. They'll largely be a pass-through when they do come in, because they'll go to sites for expenditures on arts and music. So we're waiting for the specifics on how the allocations and the requirements for spending. But I know, Assistant Superintendent Bowles has been working with sites to start that conversation, because they will have to bring plans to you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from trustees? Okay. Any public comments?
There are no virtual comments.
Okay, seeing none in person, may I please have a first and a second for a motion?
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the Arts, Music, Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant Plan.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. May I please have a roll call vote?
Member Martinez,
Aye.
Member Jaco,
Aye.
Member Pacheco,
Aye.
Vice President Gonzalez,
Aye.
President Hernandez,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. Our third action item of the night is the Extended Learning Opportunity Program Facility Improvements. Superintendent Monson?
Thank you, President Hernandez. With the board's discretion, I'd like to, as we've done in the past, kind of bundle the construction-related, improvement-related items together. So I'd like to have our Associate Superintendent, Mr. Evans, explain 7.3 to 7.6 and answer any questions for any specific, any items 7.3 to 7.6, and take those items as one motion and one vote, if that is okay with the board.
Are there any reservations with doing that? Okay.
Okay, great. Associate Superintendent Evans.
Thank you. We'll have a variety of items. The first one is some improvements using expanded learning opportunity program funds. Some of the initial grant dollars we're going to invest in capital improvements for some of the facilities that our after-school programs will be using. The ones here are restroom improvements at Edenvale, and the sewer ejector pump is part of that. The sewer ejector pump at Frost, and then also Stipe restroom improvements. These will all be done by John Plumbing, and this will help make those facilities up to date and more usable and available for our after-school programs. May I answer any questions on those? Another portable restroom we have is over at the Indigo Frost campus, and we're going to be doing a complete remodel of that inside and outside. So it's a little more extensive. This is actually not an ELOP improvement. This is part of bond funds Measure S. John Plumbing won the bid for this, but it'll be more comprehensive, replacing the ramps and the skirting around it, as well as the flooring inside and the fixtures in the bathroom. Are there any questions I can answer for you regarding the Frost Indigo restroom renovation? Okay. Also happening at Frost Indigo, you've already approved a construction project, finishing up last year's work with roofing and HVAC. But in addition to that, we'll be doing some work in front of that restroom. It's kind of the quad area for the Indigo students. And we'll be resurfacing that, giving them more of a quad space, replacing a tree that had to be removed, putting in some artificial turf there. And the same in the kindergarten yard, we'll be doing, replacing some of the grass with artificial turf, redoing some fencing and all, as well as redoing some access to the campus. In the process of fencing it in, it's now very difficult to get a vehicle in, so we're going to revamp so we can have better access onto the campus if we need to bring in a truck to do repairs or things like that. So that'll be a little more extensive project, and that's a combination of Innovate and Joe's Landscaping, who will be doing the work for that.
I know President Berlin probably recognized that little quad area. The cement is really cracked and rippling in that whole area. So that'll be a nice improvement that will keep that area also safe for students.
And then our last item is, as we go into summer, there are oftentimes many things that come up where we have to move forward with a contract in order to keep projects moving and on schedule to be completed for students to return. So we ask for a delegation of authority from the board so that the superintendent can approve summer facility improvements if that need arises.
So this was also done the last several years. And so as you recall, anything that is an item that is approved through a delegation of authority, and then at our first opportunity, we'll bring that information back to the board as we did the last several years as well.
Okay. Any public comments?
No virtual comment.
Okay, seeing none in person. Any questions or comments from trustees? Okay. Hearing none, may we please have a first and a second for a motion?
And so just as a reminder, it'll be a motion to approve items 7.3 through 7.6.
I move to adopt item 7.3 to 7.6 as presented.
I second that motion.
Okay, thank you. We have a first and a second. May I please have a roll call vote?
Member Martinez,
Aye.
Member Jaco,
Aye.
Member Pacheco,
Aye.
Vice President Gonzalez,
Aye.
President Hernandez,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. This brings us to our last action item of the night, the board policy revision first reading, board policy 0415 equity. Superintendent Monso.
Yes, I think this is a little bit of a revision to the original policy that was brought to the board, I believe last year. And so I will turn it over to Trustee Pacheco to give further explanation on this item.
There was only one additional sentence added to this, and this was, I think upon reflection, when we passed our Jewish American Heritage Month resolution. When we passed that resolution, we made a clear statement in that resolution that our district stands against anti-Semitism. And every time that we pass any type of resolution and advocacy for one of a group, whether Asian Pacific Islanders, Indigenous, et cetera, we always make it clear that our district stands against any form of bigotry or that afflicts those communities. So the sentence that we included here specifies what those forms of bigotry are. So the sentence reads as this includes, this is in the goals section of the Equity Board policy, where it begins that Oak Grove School District aims to eradicate institutional bias of any kind, including implicit or unintentional biases and prejudices that affect safety, belonging, well-being, student achievement, and opportunities. And the new sentence reads, this includes forms of bigotry, including but not limited to racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, ableism, ageism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia, biphobia, and xenophobia. So that's the only addition, and it'd be great to have our board support our Equity Board policy with this new inclusion. And it's also possible for the board to waive the second reading if you believe that this one sentence is fine the way it is.
Thank you, trustee Pacheco, and apologies that I overlooked that the edit was coming from you and not the exec staff. So thank you. Are there any public comments regarding board policy 0415 equity?
No virtual comment.
Okay, none in person. Any questions or comments from trustees? Okay. Thank you so much. I'll open up the floor for a first and a second. And like trustee Pacheco said, we could also include to waive the second reading.
I move that the Board of Trustees approve board policy revision BP 014 0415 equity. And then do I add the waiving? And move that we also waive the second reading and adopt the policy as presented.
I second.
Okay, thank you, trustees. We have a first and a second. May I please have a roll call vote?
Member Martinez,
Aye.
member Jaco,
Aye.
member Pacheco,
Aye.
Vice President Gonzalez,
Aye.
President Hernandez,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes the action items for the night and brings us to our first information item. 2023-2024 budget adoption assumptions. Superintendent Monzo.
Thank you, President Hernandez. Tonight, we will be presenting the 2023-2024 budget adoption assumptions. And I just want to take an opportunity to recognize our Business Services Department, our Director, Ms. Melina Nguyen, and also Ms. Ruth Martin, that and of course there's an entire team behind the scenes as well that build and support bringing this item to tonight. And so I'll have Associate Superintendent Mark Evans further introduce this item and provide the presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Monzo. And also I'd like to thank Melina and Ruth for all of their support. I know they work very closely with the Educational Services Department as they build the LCAP and figure out how the budget weaves in together with that. So it's a big lift on both sides of the house, and I appreciate their work and Ed Services as well. What we want to do tonight, if I can go to the next slide, is just kind of give you an update. The May revise, I want to go a little bit into the state outlook for this year, not just in the May revise and the budget year ahead, but some of the later projections on economics and revenues for this at a state level. We'll kind of go over some of the assumptions we used while building the budget. And then I'll follow the same format as before with a kind of a look at revenues, both as we close out this fiscal year, look at the budget year, and then look at the two budget years following. And the same for expenditures, and then kind of get down to that ending fund balance. What is the component? How does that work to keep our finances rolling in the next several years? Next slide, please. Yeah, actually, I think we can go on. This kind of go to the K-12 May revised funding. Here, these are what came out in the governor's May revise. And again, things have changed as of today with the legislature passing their budget. A very healthy COLA. We've heard a lot about inflation, but an 8.22% COLA for LCFF. The governor's budget in May presented significant cuts to the one-time block grants. There were originally 1.2 billion when his proposal came out in January. It jumped up to 4.3 billion in May. Trustee Pacheco, the third bullet relates to that Prop 28. That's the Arts and Music Initiative. There's been a lot of confusion between those two. That actually dropped a little bit because revenues have dropped off since the budget was originally proposed in January, but not significantly. So it'll be $933 million that'll be dispersed across school sites based on population and unduplicated pupil counts. There's still, I haven't heard in the details on the legislative budget, but the $300 million for the LCFF equity multiplier that the governor proposed is still there. There is a small reduction in the funding for TK, and that is not so much a fiscal decision as just a number of students. So they expect to have a smaller demand just based on enrollment. There has been a big demand on universal meals. Actually, we have a lot of our food service staff here because one of the agenda items on the consent calendar was our new contract to continue our agreement with Sodexo. This has been a big plus, I think, for our students and families and our district overall. And then there's still the proposed money going to the juvenile court and community schools. So those were things that came out in May. The one-time block grants were the most significant. Go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about those. These were the ones that were probably, I think, Melina and I were talking about the most, because it really did take our arts and music funds that we had already made plans for, about $5 million, and cut them in half. And the discretionary block grant was about a third cut. Those two block grants together that came to us last year came in north of $12 million. So that would have been a significant cut. And while we hadn't spent them yet, the reason being we had lots of funds from the other one-time dollars from the feds and the state in previous years. So they had a longer shelf life than the previous ones. We were spending those down. These had not been expended yet, but they were certainly part of our multi-year plan. So the governor proposed in May to go down to a $1.8 billion cut, which would have wiped out 50%, and a in the arts and music grant, and a $2.5 billion cut in the learning recovery grant. And that would have been about 30% of our funds, or probably north of $2 million. I think there's been a large pushback. The legislative budget had a $200 million reduction in the arts and music grant and a $500 million cut in the learning recovery grant. So if those come through, we're in a much better space. We'll see where the final negotiations end up by the end of the month. The other significant challenge is that in using these funds, they were putting these one-time dollars towards funding the COLA, which solved the problem this year, but didn't solve the problem for the multi-year outlook. So it could have become a bigger deficit. The state legislative budget reduces the use of one-time funds to pay for the COLA, which will put us in a better position going forward because we don't have to catch up next year and hope to have enough revenues. So the next slide kind of shows the change in outlook in revenues. The top purple line was the 2022 budget, and you can see that they were anticipating it basically $215 billion in the budget for 22-23, and the two lines below, the May revise is the lower one, and the January proposal is the slightly higher one, drops of $10 million basically in revenues, and kind of flattening out. The next slide kind of shows revenues for this outlook going on into the future. And again, the top line showing the 22-23 budget, very positive, steady incline and not plateauing out until mid-decade. But the two lines below, which is both the Legislative Analyst's Office and the May revision, you can see the significant dip, and then just kind of very minimal change, relatively flat until we get out till 25, 26, and it doesn't tick up till much later in the decade. This is something we need to kind of keep an eye on because that could impact, even though we have COLAs, it's just a very slow growth. So we'll be watching that carefully. The other thing we'll be watching carefully is the fact that all of the tax deadlines have been pushed off to October. So we're waiting to see, do the revenues come in as expected? A little bright spot, the May collections were ahead of schedule, so that was a positive if we can keep that trend. 1 month's not a trend yet, but we'll keep hoping for the best, and at least hopefully not slide back. When it comes to building our budget, we use a lot of assumptions, and we just have to, look at what we know now and what we anticipate to be happening in the years ahead. And as I've talked about before, the biggest assumption here would be the enrollment. We have taken the report that Tom Williams presented a couple meetings back, and you can see here our trend line is just going down. And it's not going down as fast as it appears. If you look at the enrollment, it is going down. There's a significant dip anticipated between 23-24 and 24-25, but the funded ADA is dropping much quicker. This is a component of the fact that we've had the hold harmless during the COVID years, which kept our higher numbers. when we average the 3 years, those are falling off. And as those fall off, we're realizing that decline a little quicker than we're actually seeing the decline in the enrollment. So you will see that we lost between 22, 23 and 23, 24, a good 450 students. And we look to lose about the same on the funded side in 24, 25. And then the pace will slow after that. So what that does is that changes your 8.22% COLA. And we'll see that when we start looking at the revenue slides. Next slide kind of just puts it more in words. Our trajectory is 150 students a year in the decline. Because of that hold harmless falling off, we feel it a lot more in 24, 25 when it drops by 450. And the other thing we've been working on, and I think we've made progress, and it's normalizing, I think more in the second half of our school year, is just our attendance rate. We talked about that before, that 96% was our standard pre-COVID. We've been running in the 93%. At this point, we're budgeting there, but this is a potential area for us to improve our attendance so that we can improve student performance, and we can also reap the financial benefits of that as well. So as we look to how do we grow that, that helps balance our books, and it helps our students get the access to the information that they need. On the next slide, you can see the COLAs going forward are not nearly as healthy as this year. They fall to half and less. And next year they'll be just under 4 and then just over 3 afterwards. And then there you'll see the LCFF base grant supplemental. This is kind of an average across grade levels of our base level funding for the local control funding formula, approaching basically 12,000, working its way up towards 13,000. So any questions about those assumptions? Okay. One more assumption, a couple more actually, the pensions. This has been a large topic in the years past. STRS, the State Teachers Retirement System, has been growing. It is plateauing, so that adds some stability to our budget. On the PERS side, which is our classified retirement pension plan, it's continuing to climb year by year. So we will see that trend by the end of the decade upwards of close to 30% if we don't see a change in market conditions and returns for that organization. So we don't see any other funds coming. Maybe I can go to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah. We don't see any funds coming from the state to help with those pension costs. We don't see any more one-time funds. And then our rolling average, another rolling average we have is our unduplicated pupil count. These are our English learners, our free and reduced students for lunches, our foster youth. We're currently about just shy of 44%. That probably will trend down as we decline in enrollment to more in the neighborhood of 40%. So that will reduce our supplemental dollars that we get from the budget, from the local control funding formula. The next slide, not the most positive picture, the downward red arrow. We have a healthy COLA. There's actually some, that's good news, but in the long term, because of our shrinking size and the smaller COLAs, we will see revenues kind of flattening and all. The next slide shows that really well. This is kind of the chart I've shared before, just updated for our estimated actuals. You can see this year, our LCFF resources were $106 million. Next year, they'll be 109. Not an 8.22% increase. It's only about a $3 million increase because we're losing this. We have fewer students generating the dollars. So, and then you'll see the following years, it goes down again, even though we have the almost 4% and then the just over 3%, the trend line is down. And that's just the fewer number of students who are generating dollars to fund LCFF. Down below on the federal and other state, what you're looking at is a lot of the one-time dollars that kind of were recognized this year. $15 million in state funds, $26 million in other state. After this year, they fall back to $4 million and $14 million respectively. And those are kind of more pre-COVID, and that's kind of the trend line that they will continue. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the Arts and Music Block Grant and the Learning Recovery Grant, that was $12 million plus. So if you just take that 26 minus those two, you get down to the 14. Other local also drops. There's a revenue source in other local called redevelopment agency funds. We see them sometimes upwards of not quite $2 million, but we never have a scheduled apportionment for those. So we don't book them until we know we have them. So they're not in the budget. It's something that could show up. It could be a possibility, but at this point, we aren't budgeting for them. So you'll see we have a very healthy amount of revenue this year. It will drop and normalize next year, and our trend line is to actually decrease, not even stay flat in the years ahead. So ways to improve that, if the RDA were to come through, if we improve the attendance rate, that would offset some of the loss of enrollment. Those are strategies we can think about on how to improve our revenue side of the house. For the next slide, more of a visual, breaking down a lot of the details, but you can see that the lion's share of what we receive basically comes from the state in the form of local control funding formula. Any questions on the revenue side? Okay. Jumping a couple slides to expenses. You'll see again our estimated actuals for our certificated staff, our classified staff, and our benefits. That's the lion's share, about 80% of what we spend. Supplies were significant this year. We did a lot of purchase, the science adoption, the Chromebooks, things like that. We used those one-time dollars. So you'll see a big drop in the next year on supplies and in services too. We used our one-time dollars to provide services, instructional supports, things like that. Those will normalize and go back next year. And then capital outlay will drop. We had budgeted a couple $1 million of ELOP funds. That won't be available next year, and it'll fall back to its normal status of about $130,000. Most of our capital outlay actually comes from the bond, not from the general fund. So you can see that our expenses will drop significantly next year due to the reduction of one-time funds. And then they start growing again. And this reflects through 24-25, all of the negotiated agreements and all. So the trend line there is going up, and we'll have to balance those two things because they're working against each other on the revenue and the expenditure side. So there's the visual in the next slide. I mean, we're a people business. That's what we spend our money on predominantly. So, any questions on the revenue? All right, and then let's jumping to ending fund balances. This is kind of how the two work together. And then what are those kind of pieces of the puzzle to optimize or keep us afloat in the years ahead? The next slide shows our just general fund revenues and expenditures and the difference. Is kind of the bottom of the balance sheet. And as you can see, we have a nice surplus this year. Puts our ending fund balance at 31 million plus. Now, that 31 million, much of it is called restricted. So we can't use it for anything. It has a designated purpose. Some of it is not restricted. But you can see as we move through, we start deficit spending starting next year with a deficit of about $8 million in our budget. The excess funds we have this year, enough of them are unrestricted that we can cover that. And we still have $23 million in the bank at the end of 23-24 based on our current budget plans. But when we get to 24-25, the deficit spending increases, and it's again that kind of revenue expenditure imbalance. And we do not have enough of that $23 million that's unrestricted to cover that deficit. So we'll actually do a transfer in from the special reserve. And this has been budgeted in the past. We've never actually had to do it, I think, in the past, is my understanding. But that will make us whole that year if we cannot change course. And we'll still have $15 million left, but most of that will be restricted. The only part really that won't be restricted at that point is what's called our 3% ending fund balance that we're required to keep. And I'll show you that on the next slide. And that trend line continues in 25-26, and the gaps are widening. And actually at that point in 25-26, when we transfer in the $11 million, that's kind of would dissolve most of that reserve. So we would lose flexibility at that point. So
You answered my second question. My first question was, you said we haven't done something before. What was that thing?
we have a special reserve fund. We have used it to kind of have as a placeholder in case we needed it, like I'm showing here, the $5.3 million. But we didn't have to use it. So those reserves are still there.
Mhm.
So right now, we're showing that, but we haven't used it yet.
And so it's similar to what you've seen in prior budgets where we use that as a placeholder and then over a course of typically for year 2, year 3. And then we continue to look for opportunities to help offset some of the costs internally with our budgets. Sometimes it's, some of the grants, for example, that we might acquire that creates an offset where otherwise we would have spent general fund dollars to make those expenditures. And so, as you know, that's why the special reserve has been so important for us and why the project that is pending is also really important because it gives us it affords us time to make adjustments and to create opportunities to continue to look for opportunities to balance our budgets.
So you said that, this special reserve from the Calero fund essentially will be most likely depleted by 25-26 if there's nothing else for us to replace the 11.3 million, right? So let's say the glider sale is successful. Would in 26-27, would the revenues from that sale be able to be used as transfer from a special reserve in the exact same way?
So we can use that as transfers and or used as one-time expenditures for things that otherwise would have been borne by the general fund. And so again, the special reserve, if you go back the last 8 years, our multi-year picture almost every time expended most of on paper, expended our entire reserve. But we continue to make adjustments to our budget where we're still been able to retain those special reserves for since we've been applying a transfer in from that special reserve. And then we look for opportunities to make other offsets to help with our budget. And so, we've restructured all of our leases as an example. We restructured our agreement with the solar project brought in about $1 million a year. So in a multi-year picture that relieved the special reserve from having to have that expenditure actually come out. And so we've been able to protect that special reserve, but it's essential for us to be able to present a balanced budget. And again, it affords us time to make those adjustments.
I guess I want to ask my question again, and I'm looking more for a yes or a no. What in 26-27, once the Calero fund is depleted, will we be able to transfer from special reserve, call it the glider fund, in the exact same way in 26-27 as we are doing in 25-26 with the Calero fund in the exact same way?
We believe that we can. And if we do expend it, it would be on one-time expenditures for those years.
And the 11.3 million and the 5.2 million, that's not necessarily for one-time expenditures.
Not well.
They don't have that restriction.
Possibly.
They don't have that restriction.
They
right?
do.
Okay.
They do have that restriction. If you look at the actual language from the special legislation, it does have language that talks about one-time expenditures as well. However, when you use it as a transfer in to make your multi-year budget work, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can even transfer in from other reserves like Fund 21 or some other areas as placeholders to meet your multi-year budget. And then once you either acquire additional revenues or reduce expenditures, those get transferred back out to the other budgets, which again is, I'm not trying to avoid the question, which is I can't guarantee that these are going to expend it. Our goal is not to expend them and exhaust them because we haven't done so in the last 8-10 years. Our goal is to continue to look at what can we do to make adjustments in our budget to continue to have a reserve. And, but hypothetically, if all of those go out, then the special reserve, if we have an additional special reserve, we would be able to transfer in to meet our multi-year obligation.
Okay, and the exact same way from Calera Fund, Glider Fund, same things, same restrictions.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, I think collateral funds have a little more fluidity than the glider funds. I think we have to present a plan. They are for one-time expenditures also. So, but I think the point here is showing that those are there to keep us whole. That's a method to be a positive rating from the county because we do meet our obligations for the next 3 years. What I want the conversation to be is like, okay, can we get the RDA money? If that's $2 million or 1.75 a year, and that's coming in each year, that's eating it down. If we increase ADA by 1% and that's $1 million, there's $3 million a year. So those are ways we would look to what can we do on the revenue side to reduce the need for that contribution? What can we do on the expenditure side to reduce the demand for expenses and materials and supplies? Superintendent Manzo mentioned some of the grants. We've got a lot of the grants on the EV buses and all, which is great. That we can use the EV buses and we can reduce our costs for diesel fuel and all that will have some savings. They're not going to take away $5 million of diesel, but they're going to, all those things together are going to help reduce that deficit. So.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so you kind of already answered my question, which was, should we continue in this route and needing to transfer those funds, and what are you anticipating or planning as far as how to offset those costs? So what I heard you say was, all of the various ways of increasing ADA and, maybe renegotiating some of the contracts and things of that nature. So my follow-up question to that would be, when should we expect to see that? Would that be a certain time of year? Is that just on an ongoing basis? Is there a certain time that the public even can just anticipate to say, okay, here's our plan, or here are the things that we're working on to kind of balance the budget and to eliminate the need to tap into some of these reserves?
Yeah, sometimes those are a bit fluid. So, but certainly for each of the interim reports, we provide kind of similar report of assumptions and things that are changes that either create impacts either to the revenue side or to the expenditure side. And so, so those are certainly the big benchmark points. And then, I think again, as Associate Superintendent Evans mentioned, some of the things are more fluid. So, when we do deploy as an example provided, the fleet of electric buses, again, those reduce costs. As we continue to make improvements on our facilities, then maintenance and operations, those costs are reduced because we have newer materials, newer fixtures, newer things that are not going to break compared to the maintenance that it might require. And so all of those are much more fluid, that we capture those elements at a kind of broader time frame. So the interim reports are good benchmark points where we can provide updates because it's hard to do that within, capturing savings of X, Y, and Z, all of these factors within a month or 2 or 3 week periods. And so, but certainly within the benchmark times, the first interim, second interim, and those reports, we can provide those updates.
So not necessarily a question, but more of a request. I know I've seen it before, more of a specific breakdown of our expenses. So I'd either like that re-forwarded or maybe something that you can work on. So specifically for supplies and services and for the other outgo, if we could, as the board, get more of a breakdown of what exactly those services or supplies are. And, how does that show up at our sites to just give a little bit more clarity and maybe life to, rather than just the term
Yes,
supplies and services.
They're big categories and they cover a wide range of things.
Okay.
Salaries and benefits are pretty easily defined.
Right.
And the people we employ. So that's an easier one to put your head around, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think to Superintendent Manzo's point, the interim reports, particularly the first interim, I'm presenting you a budget that the state doesn't even have yet. So if the arts and music grant comes through the way the legislative budget presents it, that's automatically $2 million more in revenue than we have allocated. So a lot of times our first interim budget is more inclusive of the final budget and the trailer bill language that the state does over the summer. And also our hiring is done in all too. We're pretty well staffed for the school year. So it's sometimes the best budget is really 6 months into the budget year, unfortunately. So when we're talking assumptions, there's a lot there, and we tend to take a conservative, not quite bleak, but a just kind of prepared approach, knowing that, okay, if these funds come through, that will help. So yes, there's an $8 million deficit. There's a chance if the arts and music grant comes through, 25% of that would be reduced. So, so we'll kind of get that other information to you, because when it comes to looking at what district pays for, those are things that I think are harder to grasp, the supplies and materials, and looking at which ones are one-offs, like a textbook adoption can throw those numbers off versus recurring ones. Utility bills and things like that.
But you're right, we have provided that in the past, so we can put something together to share that with the board.
And then the not quite the last slide, but the ending fund balance slide talks about what the ending fund balance is. I mentioned that $31 million. You'll see it kind of right in the middle on the right-hand side. As I said, most of that is restricted. Be ESSER funds, could be the learning recovery or the arts and music grant, could be ELOP funds. And then the economic uncertainties is about 4.5 million. That's our required set aside, 3% of our expenditures. And after we take away the restricted and the economic uncertainties, we have about $3.5 million left. That's an aside. So. Not going forward? Okay. Huh. There you go. Yeah, there we are. And so you can follow those. Another strategy we'll use is how do we optimize those restricted dollars? You can see in our ending fund balance, even when we get out to 25, 26, we have 5.5 million in restricted funds. Can we be tapping in and optimizing those to take pressure off the unrestricted side of the house? So those are parts of the complete conversation we have on how to optimize the dollars we have. But you can see by 24, 25, we don't have any unrestricted funds other than the amount we're required to have with the economic uncertainty. So there are multi tiers to how we'll approach this on both the revenue side, the expenditure side, and not just the amount we're spending, but where are we spending it from? Can we find efficiencies there? So those will be conversations as we go into multi-year. And as we have those now, I'm glad these kind of questions are now, because they're much harder to deal with when you're in the midst of it. So it's kind of trying to look down the road, and that's one of the reasons we do the multi-year outlooks. So I think I took way more time than a typical budget report, but sorry, Amy. Our next steps will be coming back on the 20th to get the formal approval of the budget and the LCAP. By putting in these transfers, that guarantees us to get the positive certification from the county, which is what we need. It impacts a lot of aspects of our operations, our bonds, and things like that. State budget negotiations, we'll see where those land in the next 10 days. And then we'll kind of monitor those tax collections, as I mentioned. And as I also said, I kind of went through this slide already. The first interim is really kind of a really good point to see where has all of the budget landed and our staffing landed and all, and it's actually a more accurate view of what the year is going to be. So are there any other questions I can answer for you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Any other questions or comments? Seems like not, but just in case. Okay. So that brings us to our second information item of the night, item 8.2, Oak Grove School District Local Control Accountability Plan, LCAP for fiscal year 23-24.
Yes, and so if you saw the public comment, or a public hearing, and today's the second part of the present of that item for the presentation, and then you'll see that item at the next board meeting as an action item as well, similar to the budget. And so I'll have our Assistant Superintendent Bowles present this item.
As we're getting that slide deck up, thank you Superintendent Monzo, President Hernandez, and members of the board, also to our staff and community present and watching. It's my pleasure to present to you a draft of our 23-24 LCAP plan. You just heard my colleague, Associate Superintendent Mark Evans, share the fiscal part of the plan. Think of this as a yin and a yang, Venus and Mars. I mean, what is it that, you complementary? So this is kind of the other half of that. And hopefully we can maybe give a little bit more information to the questions raised about where exactly are those actions and services supporting those supplies and those pieces that you would ask. Every year I bring this up with anticipation and excitement and gratitude for the team that helped with this collaborative effort, not just our ed services team and all the managers who help with the programmatic side, but as already mentioned, the business side that helped work with us on this together. And of course, we can't discount the input of our educational community. And as we have all year been getting input from them, getting the survey results from them, getting their interests. And, we in ESD have the privilege to write it, but we really strive to have this report or this plan be a representative of the word and the voices of our community and what they want in this plan for our district. Of course, we also need to take a look at requirements and budget priorities as we're making this plan together, but it really is a collective effort. So I really want to thank everyone who's put a lot of hours and time into this plan. Also wanted to share that we've been in collaboration with the County Office of Education in regular meetings weekly as they review the draft and just giving us feedback to make sure that we are in compliance. And so you've seen this visual before. This is our timeline cyclical. We are in year 3 of a 3-year plan. And so next year is a year that if we did want to make any changes to the goals specifically, or the metrics, that is the time that we can do that. But this is representative of the 3rd year of a 3-year plan. So we are here presenting the draft to you. We have the public hearing tonight, and then we will be bringing it back to you for approval next Tuesday on the 20th. So goal 1 here is represented for you, all students being proficient in meeting and or exceeding all Common Core state standards. The metrics here for this goal on the next slide have not changed. This is how we measure our success in implementation of this goal through the actions and services that you'll see on the next slide. So we take a look at the metrics there are really in the overall category. How are we doing for overall students in SBAC, overall students in iReady, overall teacher credentialing, and all of those pieces. So it's kind of that balcony view of overall health of our district in goal 1 in proficiency to standards. The actions and services here on this slide for goal 1 really should be hopefully representative of what you've been familiar with and what we've already encompassed into this goal: recruiting and hiring and retaining quality staff. I know that we've brought forward to you, signing bonuses, retention bonuses, stipends, and things of that nature we utilize for nurses as we had a need there. Those are all encompassed in goal 1. Core curriculum, professional development, supplemental curriculum, music enrichment at Title I funded schools. They get some additional dollars for that, and developing clear systems of support. So these are all things that we've brought forward to you and will continue to roll over in goal 1 in actions and services. The next slide represents some changes and additions to goal 1 based on need or based on input of the community and helping to meet the metrics of this goal. Wanted to share that we are looking at rolling out a district-wide comprehensive data management system that really gives us some flexibility to store and visualize and share data. We've been utilizing the same data source through Illuminate, or School City as it was formerly known. And we've really found that it has limited capabilities in us being able to pull data flexibly to really look at a cross section of data and needs for students. And we're hopeful that this new data system too will be able to fluidly connect with our student information system. I know we've talked about before, even pulling data of students in after school programs, which kids are in interventions. And so we can really take a look at how these programs and services are helping students. And so
so we're really excited to fold that out and not just look at academic data, but just be able to look at multiple data points of students so that we can intervene more easily and also earlier for their needs. With the adoption of science curriculum that the board approved earlier in this year, we've now begun to explore the adoption of math curriculum. We had a really exciting first read and taking a look at the rubric of what we want to take a look at. We did some paper scoring of this whole room was filled with teachers looking at 4 different curriculum. They narrowed it down to 2 through the paper screening, and we're getting ready to roll out that pilot for next year. So we know that our teachers have been waiting a long time for that, and we're excited to do that through Goal 1 for next year. And then we also have heard of an ongoing need for additional intervention materials in the area of phonological awareness and phonics. And so we'll be providing Heggerty, a supplemental program to all K through 6th grade teachers next year to help support those needs in foundational skills. Goal 2 is accelerating the academic achievement towards meeting or exceeding standards for English learners or emerging bilinguals, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, foster youth, students of color, as well as increasing the language proficiency of our emerging bilinguals or English language learners. And so you'll see here again, the same metrics that we've been using throughout this 3-year plan. We are taking a look specifically at English learner progress, reclassification rates, our long-term English learner rates. We're also looking at SBAC scores. This is where we break down the scores, not just to look at overall student achievement, but by student group, by race, and also by socioeconomically disadvantaged and English learner. So these are the metrics that we hold ourselves accountable to. You'll see here on Goal 2, actions and services. Here's a list of actions and services that we have been providing over the last couple of years. There's some areas that we're continuing to beef up and respond to. One I wanted to highlight only because it's going on today is that we have a cadre of educators attending the a Black Educator Network Summer Institute at Stanford University. So they're attending, and we're trying to increase our culturally relevant and responsive training. And so the conference is about pedagogy and practices for successfully reaching our African-American students. And so we have a cadre of teachers attending that. So we're looking for additional opportunities to expand our responsive and relevant training for our staff. You'll see the addition of diverse and inclusive books and programs, AVID at Burnell Intermediate School, professional development and SEAL. And on the next slide, you'll see some things that you maybe have not seen in other years, but additions based on feedback and also needs at the site. So we are expanding SEAL in upper grade, 4th through 6th grade at 2 additional sites next year at Anderson and Sakamoto. They've currently had SEAL up to 3rd grade. They're going to be expanding into 6th grade. We're also, as we've been bringing to you through ELOP dollars, expanding after school extended day programming to 2,700 students district-wide, utilizing ELOP funds. And then we are also offering and implementing an Introduction to Ethnic Studies elective at each of our intermediate sites. We've actually had that elective at all of our intermediate sites, but the additional thing that we're very excited about is through the work of professional development and unit development this year, we actually created a common course outline between all of the teachers teaching that course and a collaboratively developed curriculum. So we gave them time to collaborate on what are the objectives of that course, what are the units that are going to be taught. And so we have that systematically rolled out at all of the 3 intermediate schools. The teachers have been developing those units on their own in isolation. And so giving them that time to create that together, we're really excited to roll that out from the start of the year. We're also expanding cohort 2 of ethnic studies. We started with willing teachers. That was kind of the recommendation of the trainers who we were working with. Let's start with the willing, grow that foundation, that excitement. So we did that through teachers in the intermediate schools and some 6th grade teachers. But now we're going to start a systematic rollout where we are going to be expanding to all 7th and 8th grade history and social studies teachers will also be trained in the core elements of ethnic studies. We firmly believe that not just students participating in the elective, but all students in the intermediate schools should have teachers who are trained in the core components of ethnic studies. So we're going to be adding that next year to the plan in this area. That'll take us to goal 3, where we are providing inclusive learning environments for students with disabilities to support social, emotional, and academic development. This is an area we've been getting feedback from our community, from our teachers and our parents. Our metrics and how we measure ourselves does stay the same here, where we're looking at dashboard indicators. We're looking at the data of students with disabilities and also inclusion data. One thing to note, and I think we've mentioned before, is that we were identified as receiving technical assistance because of our disproportionate identification of Latino students for specific learning disabilities. So we're engaging in some work to really look at our systems to see, do some deep dive into some case files and reviews. We've also increased our percentage of students with disabilities in the district to 14%. Ideally, it's 10% is what we want to be looking at. So we're going to be engaging in that work and in our systems to see what we can do to look at interventions where we can give needs early to students, even before having to look at special IEPs and plans for them. Actions and services for goal 3 include these items which have been on the LCAP as actions and services. I wanted to note, I know this has been a topic of advocacy, the last bullet point where with COVID one-time funds, we had added these last 2 bullet points of resident IA for programs with 20 or more students in special day classes and offering extended hours to SCC IAs to support bus duty. One-time funds have sunsetted, but because of the advocacy that we have received from our community, we have worked together with the business department to try to find other ongoing funds to support that for next year. So we wanted to share with you that will continue for next year for special education. And then on the next slide, I wanted to add just some additional things that we are adding to this goal to help support based on feedback. We've heard from our special education teachers that a supplemental writing curriculum to support special education classrooms is needed. So we're going to be looking at that as an addition to supplemental workbooks and materials for special education. We're going to be providing training for special education staff on safety care. It is a de-escalation curriculum that staff will be receiving next year. And we are starting a summer institute for training opportunities for staff. In fact, we'll be having that next week for our first summer. We're excited to share that next year we anticipate a fully in-person speech and language therapist team. You may recall that during COVID, staffing of that has been difficult, and we have been trying to reduce the virtual SLP footprint over the last couple of years, and we anticipate we should be, all things staying stable through the summer, a fully in-person speech and language therapist team. We've mentioned to you that we are looking and collaborating with CSEA to add a registered behavior technicians as a district position. That was another position that we had been funding through one-time funds and had been contracting, but we're working to create that as a stable district position. We also invest, yes.
Yeah. So looking at the changes or additions to goal 3, I'm happy to see that training for special education staff on safety care will be happening for de-escalation. Some of the concerns that we've been hearing about at the podium include instances of violence, of teachers getting hurt. And so as the frequency of teachers getting hurt increased from this year versus prior years, have you noticed any data that would support that, I don't know, suggestion?
I don't have specific data from the staff side, so that's something we can share with you, and maybe that's something I can collaborate with Assistant Superintendent Chidas on. But I do know that recently we shared with you just the incidence of aggressive or severe behavior on the part of students, and we have seen a decrease in those numbers.
Okay.
Just in general, that wasn't specific to special ed, but just in general, we did see a decline in the incidence of safety or aggressive, highly aggressive, causing attempting physical injury to others. And that also includes staff or other students. And so we have seen a decrease in that from the last 2 years, in fact, lower than pre-COVID.
So it's good to hear that there's data out there that shows that. Does data exist specifically for special ed teachers, instances of violence and on the part of students to them. Is there any data that exists for that right now?
I do believe we have a reporting protocol for when staff are hurt. They do fill out an incident report and that is submitted. And so that is something that is collected by our HR department. And so that's something that we can take a look at to see in comparison.
Yeah.
So the data that we shared with you recently about just incidents of causing or attempting physical injury of an aggressive nature, we did see go down. But again, that wasn't just special education, that was representative of all students.
Would it be possible to hear what that data is by next Tuesday, especially as we're reviewing the changes or additions to goal 3? To see de-escalation is great. What I'm interested in is this data. Is that possible to hear you report out on Tuesday?
Yeah, we will do our very best and our due diligence to get that. I don't know if it's already disaggregated data, but we'll go ahead and see what we can do to, and I don't know if we have comparison data readily available, but we'll do our best to bring some data points forward to you, specifically in what you're asking about for students to special education staff.
Yeah, I think that data will only would be able to capture it if teachers actually filled out an actual report. And so, and if they did, we would have that information as part of the protocol for, it's hard to say that we capture every single incident, particularly if there isn't any reporting of some of those incidents. So I think we can get what has been reported through the workman's comp process. And so we can work on getting that information.
Okay, because if there is an uptick in these I guess instances, to see the changes or additions to goal 3 to maybe try to decrease that would be nice to see as well. And maybe the de-escalation curriculum will address that.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And then I'm going to share with you in goal 5, just some of the proactive, training and restorative practices that we're also planning out, and also some trauma-informed professional development for all teachers that we have planned for next year as well. And so those may not be a direct reaction to this, but we are hopeful that these trainings are some proactive measures and information to help just give our teachers strategies and tools for how to create environments of safety and trust in the classroom.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, of course. The last one that I wanted to mention from the slide is that we have, based on input of teachers, invested approximately additional $1.5 million in investment to adding 4 additional SDC classes to help support class sizes under the OGA contract. So when we are looking at the rollover of students in need of SDC services for next year, we did have with the current classes the ability to have space for all of those students, but it would have meant that the majority of our categorical programs and many of our non-categorical programs would have started at contract capacity. We have heard that there's been advocacy for trying to do the best we can to even work below the contract cap. And for that reason, we have added 4 additional SDC classes, one in severely handicapped over at Burnell. Without the addition of a teacher there, the one teacher would have been starting at their max, 2 autism classes, and 1 SDC non-categorical class at Anderson. So that's also another proactive measure to try to keep the class sizes, while not low, but lower than the cap. And maybe with that, we can also help with addressing some of the concerns that have been brought up by our staff this year. Moving on to goal 4, this is a goal that addresses technology.
Assistant Superintendent, sorry.
Yes, of course.
So looking at the LCAP, not the presentation, but the other one that was underneath the action item, or sorry, the information item, the special education TOSA, was that something that we had this year, or that's a plan for next year?
We did have a special education TOSA this year, and we plan to retain the special education TOSA for next year.
And how many, I guess, how does it work? Is there one at every site, or, how many do we have in the district?
We have one in the district to help support. Essentially, what we were finding, especially with our resource specialists, is that they needed someone to help guide them with a lot of the, things about how to write an IEP and compliance and meeting deadlines and things. And so the TOSA has been able to provide that support to them in efforts to help retain our resource specialists.
And how are our schools, I guess, getting in contact with the TOSA, or how do we organize this TOSA's time throughout the schools?
Yeah, there is a process where they can request support from the TOSA. And so then the special ed council, and so that's representative of the administrators, the program specialist, the TOSA, and all of the administrative staff. They meet weekly to review requests. There's also kind of a feedback line, a hotline, so to speak, or voicemail, and also a Google form request. So anytime that they need assistance, they can kind of request that through those different areas. And then the Special Education Council weekly will review that and kind of allocate resources accordingly, not just of the TOSA, but possibly of the special education specialist, as well as the administrators.
Okay. And would you say that the SPED-TOSA's time is spent like equitably across the schools? Is there one school site that they visit or support more, or?
I mean, I think to your question, yes, equitably. I would not say maybe equally. It's depending on where the needs are at. And so it could change depending on the needs of the school sites and the students. I do know that this year we had some needs of support over at Ledesma. And so I would probably say, if just based on kind of the information, my check-ins with the special education administrators, that's probably where the equitable part of her time has been spent this year, but we're hopeful that with some stabilization there, that we'll be able to that'll free her up to be able to provide support in other areas.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yes, and I forgot to mention that this is just a summary of the bigger PDF that you have that goes into more detail of the budgets and each of these action items in more detail, the little narrative explanation. So Goal 4 is about technology, and the metrics that you see here and to measure our success in this area include participation rates for CAS. We also do a technology survey annually to take a look at technology usage. Actions and services that we continue in this goal are listed here: support from IT, ed tech coaches, as well as maintaining hardware and software programs. And then on the next slide, you'll see the additions to this goal. Upgrading audiovisual systems and classroom technology. We're excited to continue to look at that in the long-term landscape through ELOP dollars, as well as what's planned for next year. New updated laptops for OGSD certificated staff. I believe classified staff have also received upgrades to hardware. I'm going to be getting my switch over tomorrow, and I'm hopeful for a smooth transition. Probably user error more than anything else, if not. And then we did during COVID and distance learning had a contract with a third party support provider to have additional IT support for parents and students. You can understandably during distance learning there was a lot of need at the homes for that, but we're going to be sunsetting that contract as the need for that is kind of decreased as we've come back in person. So we'll be able to address those needs in-house with our IT staff. So that's a change there that we wanted to highlight. Goal 5 is about school and classroom environments, supporting learning, creativity, safety, and engagement. Our community has shared that this remains their priority goal for Oak Grove. And so we really did try to put in some additional actions and services to this goal to support these metrics and outcomes: chronic absenteeism, dashboard data, attendance data, many of these things that I know have been on the forefront of our minds in terms of students. We are happy to see, at least in the last month, and we haven't gotten a report recently, but as Associate Superintendent Mark Evans shared, we are seeing some decrease and stabilization of the chronic absenteeism rate. The last numbers I saw was 15%. And as you can recall from last year, we were close to 30%. So we've essentially cut that chronic absenteeism rate in half for this year. So we're excited to see that. Goal 5 actions and services that will continue are mentioned here: PBIS, additional campus security. I know that we are putting those security cameras in place that have been brought to you in past meetings. Mental health and social emotional counseling, support for wellness. I know that we're expanding the wellness center at Edenville next year, using some of the Title I fund dollars that are available to them. academic counselors at intermediate schools, and we've mentioned the seamless universal meal service that we've been providing to students. I think you recall that from the survey results we shared, that was probably the number one thing that the community said that they would like to see continue. I may mention to this a little earlier, but we do have plans for district-wide training of approximately 80 teachers on restorative practices. We have 2 administrators who become trainer of trainers in this, so they can deliver that training in-house. And it's really a focus not just on the restorative circles of restorative practices, but also on proactive circles, building relationship, building community, building trust. And so we feel that that will go a long way in creating these emotionally and physically safe environments on campus. We have plans to expand mental health services by hiring a second mental health therapist who in future years will qualify to supervise mental health interns. We currently have mental health interns who serve close to 300 students district-wide. And by hiring another therapist who can serve as a supervisor, we can increase the footprint of our interns. We have plans to hire more district LVNs to reduce contracts with outside agencies. That's always a goal so that we can meet the health needs in-house for our students. At the AB Day in November, every school will receive a 2-hour professional development on trauma-informed practices, how to support students through trauma that they have experienced. And so we'll be providing that for all teachers on the November AB Day. And then we will be providing district-wide professional development on LGBTQ plus inclusionary practices. The February AB Day, all 7th and 8th grade teachers will receive this training. And then we are also offering this as an option of menus and services for our elementary schools to fold into their AB days and their staff meeting time. In fact, next Tuesday, we're going to be presenting that menu to them as they're developing their professional learning plans for next year. Any questions to Goal 5? All right. Goal 6 is our goal where we seek to actively engage families and community members in supporting the implementation of Common Core state standards, instruction, and providing input to program decisions. The metrics that we utilize here is we have surveys where we ask about parents and how they feel like their voices are heard and input to decision-making, what our access to interpretation and translation services include, because we believe that parents can be involved when they understand the information that is being sent to them, and we do our best to provide that in the language that they're most comfortable with. Attendance at district parent meetings is another metric, and then how many parent engagement events we offer through the district. We've been happy to see a lot of those coming back in person this year. Actions and services in Goal 6 that we will continue are listed here. So not only do we provide mental health therapists to help with the behavioral support of students, but we also have social workers and interns that help support families and students in the community. Focusing on communication and outreach. Our community liaisons are part of Goal 5, as well as school link services and parent community training on mental health. We are adding, based on input and need, to Goal 6, as we've shared with you, the need for increasing our public information officer to a full 1.0 FTE. We're finding the need, especially of the community, to be informed frequently and regularly, especially when safety needs arise at the school sites. And so we want to keep them up to date. They've also been instrumental in increasing our footprint of things like universal meals. And so that brings other more restricted funding and revenue to the district as well as increasing just communication with our community. Adjusting the schedules of the community liaisons. So we looked at their strengths, their needs, their language abilities, and then we made some changes so that their schedule was representative of the school population and needs. Well, we aim to increase parent information nights to include the topic of mental health. And in fact, tomorrow or next week, we'll be sharing with school staff where our students, we have offerings for digital citizenship and also mental health PD for them as well, and increasing budgeted allocation for translation and interpretation services. We've seen an influx of need around that in the district. Let me stop there. Any questions on Goal 6? Here you see a total of expenditures for The district and Melina gave me a number right before we started and I put it here. Okay, this represents 87.26% of our district's budget. And so we really pride ourselves in putting as much transparency of where we spend our money as possible in the LCAP. The requirement's really only to report on supplemental expenditures, but we put as much as we can here so that we are transparent with our community. The next few slides are things, actions and services that I've already gone over with you, but we thought that it was important to just pull out and highlight just things in the LCAP because we're really proud of this. Actions and services specifically to support equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging, and student wellness. So you can see through the list of all these next slides, many things I've already mentioned, but we really wanted to summarize and showcase for you that equity in our LCAP is a priority for us. And so we wanted to pull those out as standalone. And these next slides, as I mentioned, ethnic studies, relevant books, a lot of those things just kind of put here, but that way you can see in one place all of those priorities in DEIB and student wellness. This year, we had students who had participated in the Black program with Tyson Amir, and for the first time, we gave them a special cord for them to wear at their 8th grade promotions. And so it was really nice to see those around the necks of our students out in the community. The next steps, and I found as I was going through this in preparation for tonight that there is a typo or an error on this slide. We'll be bringing the LCAP to you for adoption on June 20th, not June 16th. So apologies for that oversight. And then, as I mentioned before, this draft plan is representative of the ongoing weekly meetings that we've had with our county office support folks, just so that they can keep us on the right course, that we're being held accountable to all the things we have to report to you in the LCAP. And that is our offering of our LCAP baby to you that we've been working on, yin and yang here, the programs and services, as well as the fiscal component of it. And if you have any questions, I can try to answer them at this time.
That's just how thorough it was.
I've made note of some of the data requests and we'll work to get that to you as soon as we can. Great.
Go
Thank you.
ahead, trustee Martin.
Oh, just one question on
Yes.
the parental engagement. I understand there's an app that the parents use. Is Parent Square?
Parent Square, yes.
Is there like a data of how many parents are signed up? Like,
We have a very high contactable rate on Parent Square. Our goal is 100% contactable rate. So the contactable rate just represents how many parents have a email address or a phone number that is signed up through Parent Square to be receiving those services now, or those updates. Now, when we send something out, we can also look up an additional report of how many people opened the Parent Square message. And so there are times that we follow up, especially if it's an important communication. So we see who's opened it and maybe we do some follow-up in person or in phone, just to make sure that they're getting that message. Yeah.
would you say that every parent is signed up?
We have 100% contactable rate. So we do have an outreach, a phone number, or an email for all of them on Parent Square.
Thank you.
Yes.
And any other questions, comments, trustees?
And one more question. So,
Yeah, of course.
just something that got my attention was the arts and music block grant. Is it gonna be for sure cut to 50%, or is it still in the legislator pending?
I'm hoping the legislative budget prevails where it's only cut 200 million instead of 1.8 billion, but we won't know for sure on the arts and music block grant until the final budget. I suspect it might be a little more than what the legislature proposes, but I haven't heard much confidence that it's going to be a $1.8 billion cut.
And my last question is, would this just sustain what is going on now, or is there any ideas of like after-school program or summer program for kids with arts?
Not through the arts and music block grant. Now, the Prop $28 would provide arts education, probably mostly within the school day. We don't have those plans yet. So, but that'll be a site-by-site kind of plan, and they might do some collaboration as they figure out how they're going to attack it. And those will be ongoing funds that we will have each year.
We are using that, and correct me if I'm wrong, we are adding, I think we've brought to you, we're adding a itinerant PE teacher to support the K-8 schools to program options. So Del Robley, Tweeby, Indigo, and Christopher, so that they can have that PE experience similar to their peers in the intermediate schools. And then for our summer programs, we do have a supplemental art teacher that comes in and does kind of a round of art classes for the kids who are in our summer program as well.
Thank you. No, the only reason I ask is like, I struggle as a parent to find programs for my son, and I know these low-income families could certainly use it. Like my son, for baseball for 1 week is $450 just for 1 week. And I struggle for that. So I would like to see more after-school programs for the families.
On the ELOP program will provide not necessarily arts, but lots of opportunities to do engaged activities, academic activities, play-based activities.
Yeah, so we'll expand that offering to, I think, about 600, 500 students this year to 2,700, starting next year and rolling out more students who can enroll in that after-school program who qualify.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
At our last board meeting and probably the last few, we've been talking about chronic absenteeism anytime that it was mentioned. It's one of the things that Goal 5 is related to for metrics. And we've been trying to request information regarding what families that are experiencing chronic absenteeism are saying that are causing the chronic absenteeism for them and their students. Is there any updates regarding those data requests that the board has been asking for during our discussions? And that's my first question. My second question is, what parts of Goal 5 are specific to, in terms of goal actions and services, which ones are specific to chronic absenteeism?
In the data or the conversations we've been having with students, I think we've mentioned this prior in our empathy interviews we've been having specifically with students who have been chronically absent, talking with parents and students. The biggest thing that they mentioned, there's two things that they mention. One is that they just don't feel connected at school. They don't belong. They're being bullied, or they're the mental health piece of what's going on with students. And so I think even though it might not look like a direct correlation to the absentee issue, but I think the increased counseling services, the mental health services, the addition of the mental health intern is some of the efforts that we have in trying to get students to come to school. I think also just giving them a place to engage with other students. And I think that's also in our efforts with the restorative practices, the proactive circles, and building those the community meetings and the class meetings and such. The other thing that was mentioned in the empathy interviews we had with students and parents is that the work is hard, or they feel behind. And so then they get absent, and then they get so far behind that it's really hard for them to come back because they know that they're really just buried and behind in the work of their classmates and peers. So we have been talking in the group through differentiated assistance and how we can engage in some protocols or some common understandings of what do we as teachers, or what can we as teachers and administrators do when students have been gone for a long period of time to provide some hurdle help. Could there be some tutoring maybe that we're looking at to help with those services as well for students? And then maybe where could our outreach be a little earlier for students? Right now they get an automatic robocall, but we've been talking about, how sometimes a phone call or a visit early on can go a long way. Just say, hey, we missed you today. What do you need? And then when they get back, is there some kind of a buddy or somebody who we can team them up with to say, hey, this is what you missed. Let me help you through that. There's even some consideration, and of course we can talk about this with our teachers and teachers union as well. But if after they've missed a certain amount of assignments, is there some consideration of where we can kind of narrow that gap of what they've missed so that it doesn't feel so detrimental for them getting back into school and getting going? And so a lot of the things that we talked about were more of those mental health connections, as well as just intervention, academic intervention and help and support. I know that there has been some ask about whether or not transportation has really come up in those conversations with families and students. We have not found in the empathy interviews that that's something that's come up, nor in the survey, that we've given out. Transportation wasn't anything that's come up for absenteeism. And I think also part of that has been where we have found need, especially for students experiencing homelessness, foster youth, or now even families who display a need. We've been trying to put them on a bus route, especially if there is a special ed bus route with room. So we've been trying to kind of mitigate that gap for transportation. But what we're finding is it's really the mental health pieces that are keeping students out of school. The one thing I actually forgot to mention is we are working to partner with a program called Graduation Alliance to kind of fit this need where there's students who have been utilizing Virtual Learning Academy if they're having some anxiety about coming to school. But we're finding that we might need a tier 3 support or another alternative where they can still be getting an at-home kind of education experience, but where we can still be retaining ADA and attendance for them as well. So Graduation Alliance is a company that we have been working with that we found out about actually at the CALSA conference earlier this year. And so we're going to be engaging in that, especially for our 7th and 8th graders who may need something even more supportive than Virtual Learning Academy. So we're thinking maybe that could be another solution for students who've been chronically absent because of that anxiety issue that arises for them for middle school.
Thank you. So it sounds like the trauma-informed practices, the PD around that, the restorative practices, the expansion of mental health services, those 3 things will correlate to a decrease of chronic absenteeism and so that we can increase school and classroom environments that support engagement, student engagement. Is that right?
Yeah, as we're going through and really looking at root cause analysis of what the attendance is, I think that's where that remaining kind of 6% gap is. So pre-COVID, our chronic absenteeism rate was 9%. Now we've gotten to 15%. I think that 15% increase during distance learning, a lot of that was just from COVID isolation, COVID having to stay home. I think what we're really trying to tease out is that remaining 6% of that we're still seeing of the gap of chronic absenteeism that's really attributed to the mental health, the anxiety of students, and how we can create those welcoming and affirming and belonging environments. So our kids want to come to school and feel safe, social emotionally being here. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from trustees? Okay. Any public comments at this time? All right.
No virtual comment?
Thank you. And seeing none, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I just-
President Berlin.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Mary Paz Berlin, President of GA. So I wanted to comment on a few of the things that were in the presentation. So in regards to your question, Trustee Pacheco, I've been participating in the safety committee, and in that committee, they do have a list of all the injuries that happen on campuses. And as Superintendent Monzo had shared, these are things that have been reported, meaning if a staff member classified or certificated was injured, they'd call the nurse number and they'd speak to an actual nurse and they report what the injury is. And so in that list, I'm sure that's catalog somewhere. I've got some copies of that as well. It'll have what the injury was, the location of the injury, what was the school. This year we had found some trends that it was because that was something specifically that we were looking for, myself and our safety chair, is were these happening in special education classes? And we did find that there was a high trend just anecdotally, just from looking at the charts, like at Oak Ridge, which does have special ed classes. So I think it wouldn't be difficult to disaggregate that data, but it would also include teachers and instructional assistants. And another thing too that we had talked about this year with Sylvia Alvarez, who who I've talked to in that office in HR, they kind of work on the referring folks to, I believe it's Concentra, if they need to have that extra treatment. And so one of the things that I had asked was, is that something that when she has that discussion or talk with Assistant Superintendent Chaidez, that was something specifically that she could highlight too. So, I mean, that's maybe something that Assistant Superintendent can shed a light on. But there is that documentation that you can look at. And thank you for asking about that. The other thing I wanted to share is I'm glad that there was a response to opening up the classes. I guess the other issue too, and I know that you're having an audit of the files, is that I believe we're still over identifying students. And so even if we continue to open up classes and over identify students who don't belong on that pathway, then we're going to come up with the same issues. So I think that's something that needs to get drilled down deeper too, is this isn't supposed to be a forever place for our students in those classes. If they are authentically identified to be in those classes, we need to find ways to move them and make progress and move them out. It's not a place for them to continue in. So I appreciate the response of opening those up, but we have to also look at it from the other side too, of how to mitigate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other public comments, that concludes our information item 8.2 and brings us to our last information item of the night, item 8.3, the California Dashboard Local Indicators.
Assistant Superintendent Bowles.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Monzo. So annually, it is our responsibility to share with you as an information item, a summary of our local indicators for the California Dashboard. So as you may recall, the California Dashboard reports on state priorities, some of which that we shared through the metrics of the LCAP, but there's additional local indicators that we need to report and bring to you with the LCAP draft. So in doing so, I want to introduce Director Janae Anna, who is also our coordinator of the California Dashboard, to present this information item for you this evening. Janae?
All right, thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Bowles, Superintendent Monzo, President Hernandez, and the Board of Trustees for this opportunity to share with you the results of our local indicators as part of our state accountability system. The California Dashboard includes state indicators, as Assistant Superintendent Bowles mentioned. We did present our state indicators to the board in January 2023, but also the dashboard includes a concise set of local indicators that are founded on the local control funding formula priorities, and also they're aligned with the measures that are required under the Every Student Succeeds Act. So this slide shows you the state indicators that are there, that we receive state level data that are collected, and that's how we get those measures. But the local indicators are for the LCFF priorities for which there is no state level data collected. And we are required to present our results to the board on or before July 1st in conjunction with the LCAP presentation. So on the next slide, you can see these are the 8 priority areas for our LCFF, and our local indicators are in alignment with priority 1, basic services, priority 2, Common Core state standards, priority 3, parental involvement, priority 6, school climate, and priority 7, course access. Next slide. I like this slide a little bit better because it shows you the LCFF priorities and which indicators are aligned with the priorities. So you can see that there's at least one indicator for each of the LCFF priorities and which ones they're aligned to. Okay, next slide. The way that these indicators are measured. So for the state, as I said, there's data that's collected. And if you recall that the state reports these based on the status, normally it's status and change of the data. And you can see that there's assigned a color, a color level. And this year was a little bit different from our board presentation in January. We only had, because it was a baseline year after interrupted data due to the pandemic, we only had a status. So that's what the cell phone bar lookalike status indicators show. And so that that's how the state measures the state indicators, but for the local indicators, we use self-reflection tools and rubrics, evaluation rubrics to measure our progress annually. So the scores are either met or not met. And if they're not met, then if they're 2 years or more, we have to indicate that they're not met for 2 years or more. Okay, so on the next slide, it shows you again, and usually in September, our results that for our local indicators are uploaded to the state to be included in the next state dashboard release. So, so in the next slides, I'm going to show you our results from our self-reflection and evaluation. So for priority 1, basic services, these are appropriately assigned teachers, access to curriculum aligned instructional materials, and safe, clean, and functional school facilities. We have employee data on teacher assignments, and then also the results from our Williams visits. These are the county office visits that look at our curriculum access that and our facilities. And this past school year in August of 2022, Davis Intermediate and Herman Intermediate were visited, and we successfully passed in all areas. So we met that. Priority 2 on the next slide. The implementation of standards, and I just have some highlights from our self-reflection. We met this priority, and our strengths in the reflection tool show that providing professional development aligned with academic standards was a strength, instructional materials aligned to academic standards and training, as well as identifying the professional learning needs of groups of teachers or staff as a whole, and some opportunities moving forward. The adoption of new mathematics curriculum will be an opportunity for further implementation, as well as the implementation of our newly adopted science curriculum. So we're looking forward to rolling that out in August. And then another area is just continuing to build the career technical education pathways. Other highlights from priority 2 is, there we go, ongoing implementation of standard-based curriculum support. So the board adopted core curriculum implementation, monitoring tier 1 core curriculum, and equitable access to high quality instructional materials at all school sites in the classrooms is part of the support, as well as coaching and training provided not just to new teachers, but also to veteran teachers, and monitoring of student and educator access to online resources. And we look at teacher usage data, student usage data, and impact reports to monitor that. And then continuing the work of the pilot process for now mathematics curriculum adoption. So those are some other highlights. Moving on to priority 3, parent engagement. So our parent engagement reflection tool was through a district survey, district family and parent engagement survey that we gave this spring. And in that area, we met that area. Some strengths from the survey showed us that developing the capacity of the staff to build trusting and respectful relationships with families was at 73% indicated full implementation of that. Also developing multiple opportunities for two-way communication between families was at 79%. a full implementation and also pointing out that the communication using a language that's understandable and accessible to families. There's also a little star up in the corner. That's another area of a highlight and has been a focus post-COVID. 75% of parents feel that OGSD creates welcoming environments for all families in the community. So some opportunities for moving forward for OGSD to support families in understanding and exercising their legal rights and advocate for their children. Supporting principals and staff to effectively engage families in advisory groups and with decision-making, and then providing all families with opportunities to provide input on policies and programs and implementation strategies to seek input from underrepresented groups in the community. Okay, and then the next priority, school climate. So we used our California Healthy Kids Survey, as well as our internal school connectedness and belonging survey and behavior and discipline data. So some strengths in this, we met that priority as well. Some strengths are that 86% of 3rd through 8th graders reported feeling safe on the end of the year safety, connectedness, and belonging survey. And 83% of 5th graders feel safe within a positive school environment as reported on the California Healthy Kids Survey. Opportunities moving forward include 7th grade, 41% of 7th graders feeling safe within a positive school environment at, on the California Healthy Kids Survey, and closing disproportionate suspension rate and again, chronic absenteeism gaps among student groups by race and for students with disabilities. So those are some opportunities to support our school climate moving forward. And then finally, the last priority is again, access to a broad course of study. And we look at what's offered in terms of subjects and then class offerings at the middle school level. So we met this area and kind of listed here some of the subjects and the course offerings that we have. Of course, core and content. Core content is there, as well as VPA, PE, foreign language, ethnic studies, life skills, computer technical education. Some opportunities for us is that we've begun, again, the process of piloting mathematics with the goal of bringing a recommendation to the board in May of next school year. And the district is in the process of developing. We've had this conversation, but looking at opportunities for increasing co-taught RSP and gen ed classes in the middle school level. So looking at ways that we can effectively do that. And so what you'll find in on the California ca-dashboard.org on the website is the current results. And these results that I'm presenting to you today will be part of the next release. Usually the release is in December. It could possibly be sooner this year, but that'll be combined with the state indicator data. And it looks like it does on the slide when you pull it up, and you can go in and you can find individual schools, you can pull up individual student groups, and you can kind of disaggregate it and drill down. So that website's there, and we look forward to the next state release. So that concludes the local indicator presentation. Thank you very much, and we'll have time for questions.
Yeah, thank you, first and foremost, for all of the information. I'm just looking at the surveys that you gathered and the reporting out of that, of like, you know, from families and students. I'm just wondering, what is the percentage of participants for parents and students?
Yeah, this the number of participants for that particular survey was a little over 700. I could get the exact number for you.
I guess
Um,
maybe I'm more looking at a percentage of, especially because it was mentioned that we have 100% contact with parents
Mhm.
as far as getting the information to them, but just wondering about what's the percentage of their actual engagement and participation.
Yeah.
Because it changes the numbers a little bit, right? To say 83% of parents or 75% of students, right? But it's only 75% of those who actually participated.
Right.
Right. So I'm just wondering, what is the participation level?
Okay, I can
Yeah.
certainly, yeah, we can get that data for you. And I'm not sure if we collect any kind of it's anonymous survey, but we may have some demographic data and we can maybe.
Yeah,
pull
that
out
would be,
for you
that
as
would be
well.
really helpful. Just wondering where are the opportunities to maybe lean in a little bit more, find other ways to reach those parents, to get feedback from those parents whose and students whose voices are really just missing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question regarding the Williams visits. So I know that you mentioned that there are 2 sites that were visited. Were there any other sites that were visited?
No.
And how do they determine which sites to visit, or how does that work?
Great question. So that's based on the additional targeted support, the schools that qualify for additional targeted support and CSI, which stands for an intervention, and then the other one is CSI. So those two state intervention with indications give the county office the flag to visit those schools for Williams. So it's based on the previous year. So this school year, the previous year, those 2 schools were the only 2 schools in our district who qualified for additional targeted support and intervention. And this current year, all of our schools qualified for additional targeted support and intervention. But this is not unique. This is happening all across the state. So county offices across the state kind of got together and petitioned the state to visit Williams based on the previous year's qualifications, because it was increasing their number of visits that they would make by like 75%. And so for the next year, we will also have 2 visits at Davis and Herman.
Thank you so much.
You're
And thank you
welcome.
for reminding me how we assess that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from trustees? Okay. Are there any public comments at this time?
No virtual comment?
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so that was our last information item of the night, which leads us to correspondence, board discussion, and committee reports. So I'll just open up the floor to any trustees who'd like to speak. Okay, hearing none, just thank you again for inviting us to the graduations and the celebrations that took place this past week. I know I speak on behalf of all the board of, we just appreciate all the hard work and efforts as we conclude the 22-23 school year. Happy Pride Month, happy early Juneteenth to recognize that. And I hope everybody has a restful summer, and we'll see you very soon on Tuesday. But if no one else online, if we still have folks are joining, we'll see you soon. Okay, may I please have a motion and second to adjourn the meeting?
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, regular board meeting on June 15th is adjourned at 8:39 p.m. Thank you.
Almost. Yeah. Thank you.
Did I go for your?
Well, that's why I was asking about.
Tuesday, same time?
No, 2:00.
Is it?
You're supposed to be here. at 2:00.
They were same time, like, so, same time, fine.
Yeah. But for you.